another edition of Afro News at Noonish. We are here today, October 9th, with the AFRO Editorial team. This is going to be a special edition of Afro News at Noonish. Y'all know week to week, we're going over headlines that catch our attention, things that are in the news that catch our eye. And absolutely one thing that we are following is the situation in Israel. We have Ashriel Moore here today with us, and he is actually on the ground. He's going to be telling us what he sees. Introduce yourself, Ashriel, to our audience, please.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Alexis and your team, for having me on board with you all. It's a pleasure to be able to bring this information to our people. My name is Ashriel Moore, just as you mentioned. I serve currently as the ambassador of the African Diaspora Collective to the Middle East and to Israel, and the spokesperson of the African Hebrew Israelite community here in Israel, which is the largest concentration of African Americans outside of America residing currently in Israel.
All right, Ashriel. So as you said, you're in Israel right now. Can you just tell us what was going on for you personally on October 7th when everything kicked off and rockets started rolling? What were you doing? Can you tell us what things looked like on the ground on Saturday?
You know, it's very unfortunate to say this, right? But we've kind of grown accustomed to rockets and these current conditions. This is something that I, throughout my entire life, have experienced. But only this time it was different. It was something that we had never experienced before. Why do I say that? Because in addition to the rockets, we also were infiltrated by approximately 1,000 terrorists that came from the Gaza Strip into Israel. And they literally took over army bases, cities, and small towns next to the Gaza Strip. And only later on in the day did we actually understand what was actually taking place there, because the media usually don't really give it to you raw. They don't really give you the information because I guess it's kind of hard for the people to be able to consume all of that all at one time. So they want to be able to feed it to you kind of in baby spoons. So we really didn't understand the depth of what was taking place until later on in the day. But we did understand it was something that was very out of the ordinary. Why do I say very out of the ordinary? Because you had truckloads of military or militant soldiers of Hamas inside of Israeli cities. This is something that has never ever happened. You saw that they were actually raiding homes of people and killing people right there in their homes, entire families. You saw that the military, the Israeli military, the IDF, didn't even have the ability to get close to these cities because they had the streets blocked off. The terrorists had the streets blocked off, so there was no way that the military soldiers were able to get to these areas, and anybody who came close, they had them kind of covered in a way where it was very easy for them to consume them. So for at the least 10 hours, nobody was able to bring help to these cities and to these small communities. And unfortunately, we're just now starting to understand how deep it was when we're counting today, 2 days later, 800 people who have been killed thus far, and more than 2,500 people who are wounded, more than 130 people who have been kidnapped, including children, elderly people, and women. And we're just now understanding also that the military was simply unprepared for such a situation. So this was something that was very out of the ordinary for us. At the least, the only thing that comes close to it remotely would be the Yom Kippur War. And why do I say that? Because the similarities. Let me share with you these similarities. This was on the Sabbath day, which is the day of rest here in Israel. So you don't have public transportation during this day, right? This was also during a holy day, we call them. We may call them holidays, but it was during a day where usually military soldiers are not on base, other than probably those ones who are on call, right? Because we always need somebody on duty. So they took advantage of the fact that there's limited soldiers, they have limited possibilities for transportation, And the families in these cities were actually gathered together for the holiday. And in a case like that, most people didn't even have a chance, Alexis. They weren't able to deal. And that was the same thing during the Yom Kippur War, because Yom Kippur is actually the highest of the holy days. It's the most sacred of the holy days for Hebrews, for Jews, for any people who identify with this Hebraic culture. And so in a day like that, we're also fasting. And so you're not really on any social media. They didn't even have it back then, but you wouldn't even be close to a telephone. You wouldn't really have electricity going. It's really kind of a day of introspection and reflection. And so on that day, specifically, while people were fasting, while people were on holiday, then the uh, the militaries in the area raided Israel, and that was one of the, if not the worst war we've experienced until now, unfortunately.
You guys have been attacked by air, land, and sea, and as you mentioned, there's not a lot of place for shelter. You mentioned medical treatment being a form of discrimination in the past, and so I wanted to ask what you're seeing on the ground and what precautionary measures the government has asked citizens to take, where you guys are able to find refuge in this terrible time.
Well, in almost every home in Israel currently, you would have a bomb shelter. So they do ask that everybody stay close to the bomb shelters, which is usually a room, a sealed room in your home that should be the safest area in case of a rocket hitting your home or anything like that, then that'll give you maximum safety. But for those who are closer to the conflict itself, which is on the Gaza Strip, near the Gaza Strip, or up to about 30 kilometers from the Gaza Strip, then they're required to actually remain in their shelters throughout this entire period of time. So they do have an issue with having access to food and water and all of those things. And it's a struggle, right? It's a struggle because it wasn't anything that we were prepared for. Now, at the least where I stay, where I live now, which is in Tel Aviv, we still have the ability to access stores and whatever it is that we need, so we can be able to purchase the fundamental practical needs to be able to handle the situation. But people who are near the border, they don't have access to that, so they're in a very bad position at the moment. And the government is still actually trying to figure things out. Believe it or not, actually, they have no idea how to even deal with this situation. They were caught so much off guard to the point where they don't even know what to say to the citizens at the moment. And most of the activities that have been taking place, which are, for example, organizing food boxes to be able to, to send out to the families that are in need, that don't have access to the stores. Eritrean asylum seekers have been the ones who've been organizing that. You have a civil group that organized a find and mission for all of those people who still up until now, nobody knows what happened with them. There's a group now that established themselves to be able to try and identify those people, to target those people, to understand where they are. So everything that's actually happening right now in Israel is happening by groups that are organizing themselves, Israeli civilians, because the government has no idea. The government has no idea what to do, and unfortunately, it's left to us now to figure it out.
Yes, we know the UN has called a meeting at the United States, asked them to condemn the terrorist group, which has not happened yet. But I also did want to talk with you a little bit about how much warning you have in Tel Aviv, as we know this attack started at a music festival where you said there was little to no warning. But today you mentioned that you might hear a siren or a call. How much time is there in between that and the time that you would be able to get into your shelter, or know, how far away a strike might be?
Well, usually you will you will hear the siren, and you have, at the least in this area now, you have up to 15 seconds that you need to be in your bomb shelter, right? And so you should stay close. You should stay close. But for those who are, like I say, near the border, they don't have 15 seconds. Most times they don't because we have the Iron Dome here also, that is the counterceptor to the rockets being shot. But sometimes the Iron Dome can't be able to identify all of the rockets because, for example, in one day you have approximately 3,000 rockets that are being shot to different places. And today you have rockets being shot to Jerusalem and to Tel Aviv and up north and to the Gaza Strip. So there's no way to be able to actually deal with all of these various fronts all at the same time. And so the only thing that the government, yeah, I mean, the UN is asking for the United States to condemn these situations or whatever, but nobody should have to ask anybody to condemn such a horrific situation. I mean, in a case like this, before we know the details of what actually happened, you have 700 people who were killed, innocent beings. Now, we're not talking about military soldiers. We're talking about 150 people who were taken into custody or actually kidnapped and taken into enemy territory. You don't really need anybody to condemn those things. Anybody with moral conscience could be able to understand that this is not acceptable in no way, shape, or form.
Yeah, that's very true. And I'm hoping to see other countries respond. But I wanted to open up to Tashi, Aria, and Megan to see if you all had questions too.
I did actually. Oh,
Go ahead. You can go ahead,
go
Aria.
ahead. Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask you, what was life like prior to these attacks for the African American or the Black community there in Israel? I know that you said you guys have a significant population of Black people there, and you mentioned that you guys have been there since 1968. Obviously, there's been some issues that you have faced in Israel that are similar to the issues that Black people face in America, that being systemic and overt and covert racism. Can you talk about, I guess, some of the challenges that you guys have overcome, some of the revolutions that might have been had, the civil rights movement that you perhaps have dealt with there as well, and what that looked like prior to these attacks?
You see, I would have to divide that into a few different points because you have the community, the African Hebrews. There, just so you could know, there are about 5 different Afrocentric communities here in Israel. You have the African Hebrew Israelite community, which is the largest community of African Americans outside of America. You have the Beta Israel Ethiopian Jewish community. You have the asylum seekers from Sudan and the asylum seekers from Eritrea. And then you have the Afro-Palestinian population who've been here for thousands of years. They remain here. So it's been different for every one of the various groups. But I would say, at least from my community's perspective, it's been a struggle because we have been fighting for the most fundamental things that every human being should be able to receive, whether you are an asylum seeker or a Jew or a Christian or a Muslim or just a regular person in a democratic state, which is access to very fundamental things like healthcare and education and social services. But we've been fighting for these things since 1968. And as a matter of fact, I'll tell you as well, Aria, that we've been fighting also for the last 2 years against the request from the Israeli government to deport approximately 7% of our community members from Israel, claiming that we've been in Israel illegally for 55 years. Now, that's absolutely absurd, right? We're talking about 3 generations of people who were born and raised here. We're talking about we're the only community in Israel per capita that served 100% in the military. We've contributed so much to Israel in every aspect possible, but there's still this this racist ideology when you're dealing with Black people. It really doesn't matter if you are a Black Jew or not, because sometimes they try to use the excuse that Israel is a Jewish state, and as such, whoever is not considered Jewish according to the halachic definition of a Jew, then you don't have the right to be in Israel. But that's not absolutely correct, because you also have communities of people from Europe, who were 100% Christians, and they've been allowed to be in Israel. You also have more than 250,000 infiltrators from Eastern Europe that came to Israel claiming that they were coming to visit and on tourist visas, and they remained here. Now Israel is working to be able to give them at the least the fundamental rights that they deserve as human beings. But we as Black people have to fight for everything that we receive. And even when we're fighting, we don't always win, unfortunately. So it hasn't been an easy struggle. And across the board, just being Black in Israel has brought with it a significant amount of challenges for every community. Every Black community in Israel has experienced that systemic racism from the government to institutions that have been operating very specifically and clearly against Black people here in Israel. But also, and it's not a matter of civil rights fight or whatever, because none of the people who are here are asking just for civil rights. Every group of people who are here, they feel like they have a deep spiritual connection to Israel. These are not people who migrated to Israel looking for jobs or anything like that. Besides the asylum seekers, who obviously Israel has signed off on the Geneva Accords from 1954. So obviously, if you have people who are fleeing a war and you're the only country in the area who has actually signed off on those accords, you have to allow those people to come into Israel. But outside of them, everybody else migrated to Israel for a very specific spiritual cause because of their relationship to this space, to this country, to this ground, to their spiritual ancestors. And so it's been a fight. It's been a war. It hasn't been very easy, but area, we haven't stopped fighting. That's the thing. And as long as you continue to fight and continue to push, and you have to agitate until you actually get what you are looking for and what you want. Sometimes we may not get it all, but at the least we know that we fought in order to be able to get it, and that's what we continue to do up until today. Do you have a follow-up question?
I'll jump in here. I just wanted to know, if there is anything, what can African Americans here in the States be doing to support, their brothers and sisters across the continent?
I like to use the brothers and sisters from the Jewish community and to show how they support each other here in Israel. Even if they don't agree ideologically, even if they're not on the same side of the political spectrum, they still understand that it's their responsibility to support their brothers and sisters here in Israel, because Israel depends on that support. And so by us being the largest population or the largest concentration of African Americans outside of America, who have laid the foundation for brothers and sisters worldwide to be able to understand the importance and the privileges of creating a self-sufficient community where we are fully in charge of everything that we do. Yes, we are operating with the government, but we're not fully dependent on the government. And the only way that we can be in that position is if we get the type of support that we need from our brothers and sisters internationally. So that means that we do need that financial support. That means that we do need the political support in Congress and in the Senate and wherever else we can be able to get that support. That means that we do need voices and media outlets to be able to share our story through, which you're doing excellent right now, allowing us the opportunity to be able to do this. These are things that we actually need. And we also need the prayer. And we also need the brothers and sisters to be able to come here and to experience and to see, to show that we have numbers, and those numbers can be able to then translate in terms of Israel into dollars. And so, you bring those groups here to visit and tours and all of those things, that Israel is identifying those as financial possibilities. But if you all say now that we are not going to come to Israel any longer until the situation is settled with the African communities here in Israel, then I'm sure that will have an effect. But you have to be dedicated to that, just like everybody else is dedicated to it. And by us being that vanguard for the community in America and other places in the world, we then will be able to take this foundation and replicate it in other places where we can be able to then build our own institutions, become more self-sufficient, and not dependent on anybody outside of ourselves. And when I say ourselves, I mean the African civil world that includes the diaspora, that includes Israel, that includes the continent of Africa itself. That's how we have to start looking. And once we look at it from that perspective, I'm sure we'll be way stronger than what we are now.
All right, thank you for that. It is 2023 and this issue is still going. The conflict is still going. It's 2023. And as you said, I mean, we're seeing a first of its kind attack on Israel. So brutal and so violent. When do you see the bloodshed ending? What do you think is needed in order to finally come to a resolve on this centuries-long issue, this centuries-long fight?
The issue is, Alexis, that there are people on both sides that are actually enjoying this fight because of what they're getting out of it, unfortunately. Leaders on both ends are dedicated to continuing this fight because they're benefiting from it. They're benefiting from it financially. They're benefiting from it politically. They're benefiting from it socially. And the little people in the middle are the ones who are actually being most affected. The little people in the middle are the ones who are dying for their desires. And so it's very unfortunate because we always look at it from a political perspective, right? But it's not all political, because we as people, as the ground roots, could be able to organize ourselves. This is what we actually have been doing with some of the members of the Palestinian community who are afraid to even share their faces because, you know, it's not acceptable to sit down and to talk to other people about possibly bringing a solution to this current situation. And we are also talking to people from the Israeli side and trying to mediate and bring all of these minds, these young minds together, understanding that we're the leaders of the future. And so if we want this current situation to be finished, we're the ones who are going to have to bring a solution to it. And I think it's very easy because at the end of the day, we're talking about people who believe that they're from the lineage of Abraham. Both sides are saying they're from the lineage of Abraham. And so the fact that they're from the lineage of Abraham, this country, this land mass was offered or promised to the children of Abraham. And so we're actually cousins when it comes down to it. We're actually family members who are fighting for who's going to have the biggest space in the house, unfortunately. But as soon as we put the political ideologies aside and we look at it from a humane perspective and a spiritual perspective, then we'll be able to actually reach a conclusion that allows us all to be able to live together. Because 70% of the things that we're even talking about are very irrelevant because we agree on most of them. We're talking about the things that we don't, that's the points of contention where we don't agree on things. Well, you're not going to agree on everything, but I guarantee you one thing, both sides have mothers to children that they would much prefer for their children to be alive as opposed to being dead. I guarantee you that these people would like to have a regular life, that they enjoy themselves, they're able to go out without fear, have a good time, and go home safely. I guarantee you that these people would like to have some relationship, strong relationship with the brothers and sisters on each side. But you have the radicals in the middle that are preventing that from being able to happen. And so because of those radicals, it makes it seem like there's a bigger issue, way bigger than what it actually is. But the silent majority don't actually agree with that, but they're silent. And so you're letting the bullies take over and have everybody thinking that the bullies represent your position, which they don't, but you are not standing up and saying, we don't support this. We condemn this type of behavior. We are not for these radical, we don't want that. We want to live with you in peace. But the only time, and you ask, when can we be able to actually reach a conclusion? The only time we can reach a conclusion is when we are basing the conversation on truth, on humanism, on spirituality. Other than that, everybody will have their political positions, their dispositions, their beliefs, their religious persuasions, that I don't know of any religion that says that you should be in constant war and conflict. Not even in the Quran. The Quran speaks about the great patriarchs of Israel, Ibrahim, Musa, Noah. The Jewish Bible speaks about these people as well. How is it that we can't get along if we are claiming to believe in the same patriarch and come from that same lineage? There are other desires in the middle, and that's the actual issue, Alexis.
Well, Ashriel, thank you so much for this time today. I think that is the perfect ending point. Of course, we're going to be checking in with you. Make sure that you give us updates. I do want to let you go, though, because I want you to be safe. I want you to focus on you and your family and your safety. But thank you so much for explaining this issue in a way that I think we can understand it, in a way that I can understand it. And just thank you for giving us this time. Is there anything else you would like to add?
I would, the only thing that I would say in addition is that we're continuing to, as people who are seekers of peace, we're the ones who are trying to create a better environment, a better society. And as a matter of fact, it's your Black brothers and sisters who are at the helm of it. Because we can talk to anybody. We don't have a bias against anybody. We've never oppressed anybody. We've never socially or intellectually or any other way prevented anybody from having access to very fundamental things. So we have a better understanding of both sides. We have a very good relationship with both sides, and we're trying to bring them closer. The quicker we can bring them closer from a grassroots level, the quicker you will start to see a change at the higher levels. It takes time, and it's going to take a lot of work. But right now, the only thing that we can be focused on is trying to deal with this current tragedy of more than 800 people being killed at the moment and counting. So I want to thank you for having me on to explain what's going on this end. And I hope that I was very clear with our positions and with the information. And it'll be my pleasure to continue to update you all in regards to the developments here in Israel. Hopefully we'll have better news the next time we get on.
All right. Thank you again. Thank you to everyone who joined us for this edition of Afro News at Noonish. Please follow our coverage of this on afro.com and on our social media platforms. Thank you.